Hello everyone. So here's a short demo on how to do automation in Logic Pro. So right now I have a track that I just set up. It's just got a bass of pad and some drums. Sounds like this. I want to record in some automation and then because I want some things to change as they go. For example, I want the Mellotron flute to the pad sound to fade in, to not come in at the beginning. So I could, of course, manually move this fader as I'm playing it every time, or I could record automation. Automation works two ways. I can either do it basically offline, in other words, not while it's playing and I'm clicking in points where I want automation to happen, or I can do it live. While it's playing, I can record automation. So if I want to do it, for example, if I have something simple, like I want to just fade in from, say, silence to a certain level, then I'm going to probably click in the offline type of mode. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the automation. So you can click the automation button, which is this one that looks like a line with two dots. Or as you can see from this little shortcut, you can just hit the A key, A for automation, and that will open up the automation lane. So it kind of grays out these tracks, but it allows me to click in automation. By default, volume is going to be the first one that you could click in. However, I can click on here and I can change through lots of stuff. Pretty much anything that you can change in a plugin, in an instrument, anything that you can move a knob, you can automate. So I can go in here and I can change volume. I could even do stuff like changing the panning to go back and forth. You can see here I go to main, I have got volume and panning and solo and muting and all this stuff. But I also have any effects that I have or plugins. I have all of their controls that I could automate as well. Right now though, I just want to in fact do volume. So I kind of have my levels already set, which pretty much I just have my unity gain right now. But I'm going to click to create points. So I'm going to say by the time we get to bar 5, I'm going to click a point there. I want it to be at this kind of level I have it right now. So I'm going to go over, let me get the playhead out of the way. I'm going to go over and grab this first dot and I'm just going to drag it down. So now you can see visually this kind of gradual fade in. So maybe that's exactly what I want to do. So that's a very simple way that you go in and just click in the points. And of course I can get crazy with this and have all kinds of changes that I want to do. But it's a good way to quickly and easily do a simple type of thing like that. Now, as I mentioned, you can automate anything. So I may, for example, I have an effect that I've put on this track, this ring shifter. This is what it'll sound like, and bring up the ring shifter. And this will be what it'll sound like if I have that on. I'm going to solo this track, turn that on. It's kind of a cool effect compared to the original. But I think what I want to do is basically have it play kind of normal, and then at some point, maybe at bar 11 or something, I want that to suddenly turn on. So what I'm going to do is create another automation, which is basically to turn the bypass on and off of this particular instrument. So again, that's not something I'm going to necessarily do live, although I could just here and click and turn this on and off while I'm actually recording. But in this case, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, I want to go to the main, and I want to basically my insert, I want to bypass my ring shifter. So I click that. Now I have a new lane. You can see how the volume is kind of grayed out. It's still there, but it's grayed out because I'm actually doing the bypass. And I'm going to click again a point to say, oh, right there. Now you can see how it's bypassed at the beginning. So this is like an on and off switch. So now it shows it's bypassed and then suddenly turns on right here. So you'll see this button turn on as soon as we get to that point. So it's suddenly on at that point. Now you may want something like an effect where you want it to gradually that effect to come in. And I could do that. I would just have to basically automate this output dry wet. That's saying how much of the dry original signal am I going to hear, how much of the wet meaning affected signal. So I could automate that to basically start from 0, totally dry, to whatever wetness level, just like I did the volume. So in this case though, I wanted to just bypass to turn something on and off. Okay, so another thing that you can do is, let me get out of automation mode real quick. Click A or get out of there. So one thing I also want to do, this bass pattern, it's okay, and it's using Alchemy, so I'm going to bring up Alchemy. And one of the cool things Alchemy lets you do, I just brought up a preset, but whether it's a sound I created or not, or a preset, but the presets all have down this bottom area, whether you're in the browser, the simple mode, or advanced, you can still see it down there at the bottom. But it has different variants. It has 8 variants of that sound. It's always this top left corner is going to be the default sound. But as I move it around, you'll hear different versions of that. Well, maybe I wanted to sound something like this. I want to do some crazy automation like that. Well, that's going to be a lot harder to click in offline, because what it's really doing, if you look over to the right, you can see this kind of XY, these 2 boxes over on the far right, over in this area. You can see those dots moving around, and that's really what's happening. Is I'm going either up or down with X or Y parameters. So it's kind of, it would have to be 2 things I would have to enter at once, click in there. It'd be a little bit harder. So what I'm going to do is actually automate this live. Most DAWs have some type of automation mode where you can either do what's called, I'm going to go over here to my automation thing. You can do either touch, latch, or write. Read basically means read only. As you can see in any track, it'll say read. If I bring up my mixer, you can see that they all have this read. You can see this one's green because I've already added some automation. Where it's kind of grayed out, that means there's no automation that's being played. So if I want, I can put this into touch or latch mode. Write is rarely used, but touch or latch mode, the 2 different ways those work. Touch is basically saying, while I'm touching this control, that is, maybe I've assigned it to a knob on my keyboard, or maybe I'm actually clicking on it with my mouse and holding down my mouse. While I'm touching it, it's recording whatever I'm doing. But as soon as I let go, either physically or let go of my mouse, it's going to jump back to where it was before I started moving that parameter. Latch, on the other hand, latches on to where you're leaving it. So as soon as you let go, it just stays there. You can kind of think of this like the modulation wheel and the pitch bend wheel on any MIDI keyboard. The modulation wheel, if you move that and let it go, it stays where you left it. So that's like latch mode. The pitch bend wheel is more like touch. I bend that pitch up or down, but as you all know, when you let go, it springs back to that center point. So that's like touch mode. Most of the time, latch mode is the more intuitive mode, because you kind of assume that if I'm going to touch something and let go, it's going to stay there. So that's normally what you'd use. But touch can be effective if you're especially just wanting, like, your volume level's just right, but you want to bump it down for just 1 second and then let go, and then it pops back to where it needs to go. So there's a use for it. But in this case, I definitely want latch mode. So I'm going to turn on latch mode. I want to make sure I have the right track selected. I do. I've turned on latch mode. Now, when you're recording automation in this way, you don't have to be in record mode. You just have to be in play mode. So I'm going to get this started playing, and then I'm just going to start dragging this box around to kind of change the timbre. Now, if I want to see what I did, I again hit the A key or I hit this automation button, and I can see that there are 2 lanes. I'm going to actually turn on the 2 things. It says used. So I want to actually see, oh yeah, look at all those points it added in. It's just me dragging around. And there's the other one. So there's my X and Y. You can see how it would have been much harder to kind of click in 2 different things. So it was much faster and easier to do it that way. One thing you want to make sure when you're using touch or latch mode is that when you are done, you put that back onto read so that it'll only read that. You won't actually mess it up. Now I can go in certainly with a pencil tool. I can select a pencil tool and I can edit stuff. I can erase stuff. I can draw that if I wanted to. So whatever different ways. So let's hear this whole masterpiece here with all this automation. Stuff coming in. Okay, so it gets really fun to do that. I had to set my pan levels here because everything was straight up the middle. It just didn't sound good. So I could automate that where it actually automated the panning, but I was just as it's playing like, I should push those off to the side. Makes it sound much more interesting. One note of caution, when you're doing automation, you definitely want to do that later in the process, especially when you're talking about volume automation. If I were to click this base pattern and decide later, I want that to start at 5. Notice that if I drag it, usually you'll get this message from Logic saying, do you want to move the track automation data? Always read messages when they pop up like that. And of course you may say, oh yeah, of course, because I don't want the automation to be at the beginning where nothing is there. So you'd say move, and as you can see when I hit automation, oh yeah, it's moved it all around for me. So you'd want to be careful of that. But why you usually wait for, say for volume levels, because what if I decide later on, I didn't like this volume level when it got to right here, that wasn't loud enough. If I change that on my fader, the automation is still going to play back. So it's going to basically ignore any way you set it. So you'd have to go in and change that automation. I'd have to go in here and say, oh, let me go back to that volume and adjust that. So if you do this automation too early in the process, it'll be a little frustrating because you'll constantly have to go back and fix your levels. So you basically want to get everything in there, get it kind of rough mixed, and then start doing your automation stuff. Okay, so have fun with that. It's really a great way to make things sound much more interesting and kind of transforming within sections of your piece.